Hey, Monroe here. I just want to say a quick thanks to all you guys who have supported the My Name Is Sheba podcast. It really means the world. It's definitely an experiment, but one that I hope brings you joy and gives some insight into the messy, nonlinear creative life. And I just want to remind you guys that you can find the music, which is Kandace Springs' new album, and the soundtrack to the podcast at Apple Music or wherever you stream audio. And by the way, the album is also entitled My Name Is Sheba. Again, thank you, thank you, thank you. And with that, let's dive in. Previously, in Chapter 3 of My Name Is Sheba, Burg and Cole unapologetically embraced their story. Burg also knew, however, that there'd be consequences for his actions. A face-off was coming. But today, on this occasion, nothing else mattered. Every thought or care not lending itself to this cherished event would be cast aside until some necessary time in the future. With vows stated and license purchased, Burg and Colette became Mr. and Mrs. James Burgundy Hawkins. And in the midst of uncertainty and a hard season, that Wednesday, March 28, 1990, was filled with hope and promise. Jewel then treated them to an early dinner at Jack Fry's, a storied Louisville restaurant she and Charles frequented in the early 70s. They were squeezed in without a reservation for a 4:45 table. That night, the three of them laughed, told stories, and recounted the events of the last 24 hours that would, from then on, be spoken of as the perfect day. From Subplay Creative, I'm Monroe Jones, and this is My Name Is Sheba, the coming-of-age saga of iconic jazz R&B artist Sheba Hawkins' rise from obscurity as an orphan to superstardom and the music she created along the way. My Name Is Sheba is written around the original music from the album of the same name by singer-songwriter Kandace Springs. Check out My Name Is Sheba, the album, at Apple Music, Spotify, or wherever you listen. Chapter 4. The next morning, Burg awoke under a heavy weight. He now felt a sense of resolve and urgency to tell his folks about his huge life change. Multiple events he knew they'd have wanted to be involved with. The old tendency to shut down, to listen to his critical voice say, "You're a loser," was powerful, especially when his dad came to mind. But he'd not made those recent choices recklessly. Burg knew he wanted a life with Colette and their baby in it, and needed to take steps to ensure that reality. Now, they were a reality. They stood together. There was now a foundation to defend. His mom was passive, but his dad possessed a power of persuasion that had held Burg in its grip his whole life. He hated who he became in his dad's presence, transformed into someone Cole and his friends wouldn't recognize. He even spoke differently. Not this time. He was writing his own story. Awakening with all these thoughts as he lay in the bed of the childhood girl who'd now become his wife, filled Burg with a sense of irony he couldn't define. Cole opened her eyes, saw Burg, and smiled. "I'm right where I want to be for the rest of my life," she said. "We're all in now." Burg turned and smiled and said, "Yes, Mrs. Hawkins, we are all in now." It was hard saying goodbye to Jewel on Friday morning. She'd shared such an important moment with them. By the end of the trip, they were calling themselves the Three Musketeers. And Burg and Colette were so comforted knowing they weren't in it alone. She made them promise to keep her in the loop and allow her to be involved from now on. After the last tearful goodbyes, they boarded the coach. The mood on the bus back to New York was pensive at first. They'd just come off of a mountaintop experience, a brief break from reality. After a couple of hours, though, Burg and Cole were grateful to have the long trip back to reflect, with the Greyhound and time again becoming a barrier between them and the outside world. They discussed how Burg would break it to his dad. "When do you think we should call?" asked Colette, hesitantly. "Tomorrow evening? That'll give them Sunday to come to grips with it all," said Burg. "Okay, I support you, baby. You got me on your side now," answered Colette. It was 2 a.m. when they finally made it back to the apartment, and 5 o'clock before they fell asleep. Nerves ran high on Saturday, not unlike the feeling one might get while awaiting trial. By late afternoon, Burg was bouncing back and forth between anxiety and being pissed off at himself for being anxious. The last couple of hours had been agonizing. "Why do I even care?" he thought. "I've spent most of my life looking for the day I could finally flee, be on my own, become me." By 5:30 p.m., Colette was giving Burg a pregame pep talk. At 6, he placed the call. "Hello, Hawkins residence. Pop? Hey, boy, how are you?" Burg's mind was on stun. He was semi-conscious. The small talk was a blur. Pleasantries were exchanged, and Burg honestly wouldn't have been able to recall a word of the back and forth. It was all just a shaky bridge to get to the reason why he was calling. A slight lull. Then Burg's dad, "What can I do for you?" Burg took a shallow breath, then swallowed. Pop, I got some news I want to share." Then a deep breath. "You may want to sit down." Silence on the other end. Burg's heart and mind were racing. He searched frantically for the words. "How do I say it?" he thought. Then he launched. I'm okay, everything's fine, but I need to tell you this." "I'm listening," said the voice on the other end, bracing. "Colette and I are going to have a baby." Deafening silence from Burg's dad. He could hear his mom in the room, concerned. "What is it? What's happened?" "Burg got his girlfriend pregnant," uttered James in a low voice, staring off into space. That tone, that phrasing. Burg was instantly filled with all the familiar demons of childhood. He feared where the conversation would go. "It's not like that. We've taken steps. We're committed," he said. "We're seeing this through. We love each other." "Love? What do you know about love? You live in a lie, boy." Burg punched back. "Well, if I am, it's because I had a good teacher." Silence. Burg hit a nerve. He regretted hurting his dad and stooping to his level. "Okay, Pop, okay, maybe so, but it's gotta be my life. I gotta make my own choices here, my own mistakes. I'm taking my road. Look, I'm grateful for how you and Mom raised me, but you gotta understand, I'm not you. I gotta listen to my heart on this." "Oh, boy, don't tell me you're falling for that follow your heart bullshit. What did they teach you up there? That won't pay the bill, son. You can't support a family on pipe dreams. You better cut this crap out and go get a real job with the degree that I paid for." "Is that a threat?" "You take it how you want to," said James. "No, what does that mean?" Burg wanted to hear him say it. "It means you're a man now. You're making your own way. Go on then, get out there. Let's see how well you do." "I didn't pass the bar," said Burg. "What? Why not? What happened?" "Well, Pop, right after graduation, I got this shot to pursue the music, and I thought if I took..." James cut him off. Here we go. The music. We talked about this, boy." "We did, Pop. You said once I finished school, I could do whatever I wanted." "It's that cockamamie girl, isn't it? She filled your head with crazy notions." James crossed the line. Burg exhaled. Then calmly, "We're done here." "You're damn right we're done." "You know, Pop, I love you, but I pray you don't end up a bitter old man who played it safe and killed his heart in the process," said Burg. Well, at least I'm not sacrificing my baby on the altar of pop music. Silence. Burg was deeply hurt. I'm hanging up now. Let's do that, said James. Burg hung up and burst into tears. Colette, eyes red, had already been crying. The loser voice spoke through him. He hung his head. I didn't even get to speak to Mom or tell him we're married. Probably for the best, said Colette. Your dad might have burst into flames. It was not the way Burg wanted it to go. He felt exhausted, defeated, and weirdly relieved that it was over. But in that exchange, his dad had landed a near fatal blow. You can't support a family on pipe dreams echoed in his head. A seed had been planted. What if we can't support ourselves? What if we can't give our child the life they deserve? The weeds of guilt and shame had just taken root in Burg's heart. During the last trimester, they were back to survival mode. Burg and Colette had taken on a kind of numbness, going through the motions, playing whack-a-mole with the most urgent need that would rear its head. They were performing a couple of nights a week, but because Colette was late in the pregnancy, she was less able to work, though she did do what she could to prepare them for becoming a family. The things they didn't have answers for went simply unaddressed. Fortunately, Cole was still part of her mom's insurance plan, but beyond that, fear had taken hold, and they felt alone in their struggle. In their pride and shame, they'd become stuck, isolated from the world and from each other. Burg and Colette had now fallen prey to the stories in their heads, false narratives. Burg's self-talk had become cruel and relentless. You don't deserve to have a kid. You can't even take care of you and your wife. You're a step away from homelessness. Is that what you want for your family? You're a failure. Of course, solutions existed, and had they been in a healthier state of mind, they might have seen them. But they were overcome, distraught. By June, the 8th month of Colette's pregnancy, they'd hit a new low. They'd fallen behind in the rent, and both utilities and water had been cut off and back on at one point. During the last ultrasound appointments, Colette had broken down during consultations with the OBGYN, and understandably, the doctor had grown concerned about her stability and took note. What should have been a joyful season of anticipation for Burg and Colette had become a dark period filled with introspective, despondent days. There'd been no communication with Burg's family, and the few times they'd talked with Jewel, they'd pulled it together just long enough to convince her that things were under control. The due date had been set for July 10th. Burg and Cole had told Jewel that, of course, they wanted her there. Both just hoped it would be during a time when the lights were on. Other than a 2-week supply of diapers and a used bassinet Colette found at the pawn shop, they were woefully unprepared. But on the morning of July 6th, Colette felt what she thought might be labor pains. They called the doctor and received instructions to monitor the contractions and come in when they were 5 minutes apart. They then called Jewel, who headed to the airport and proceeded to fly standby. Burg and Cole strangely found themselves excited and hopeful. They welcomed the opportunity to temporarily suspend reality as they'd known it and be fully present for the birth of their child. They checked into New York Presbyterian Lower Manhattan Hospital at 4:45 p.m. Jewel had beaten them there and was waiting in the lobby. In the midst of all the uncertainty, they knew at least that for the next couple of days, they'd again be suspended in time and space, protected from the outside world. Burg said, "Cole, baby, we're back on the bus." She knew what he meant and smiled. The labor was a marathon. Burg and Jewel never left Colette's side. And at 7:31 a.m. on Sunday, July 7th, 1991, Burg, Colette, and Jewel welcomed Sheba Blue Hawkins into the world. Burg yelled, "It's a girl!" All four cried, Sheba the loudest, and then Burg fainted. After the initial procedures to determine that all was well with mother and child, Burg and Colette held Sheba as long as they could fight off fatigue and Jewel. Burg said, "You're the most beautiful mom, and now we got the most beautiful baby." Another fleeting moment when the world was as it should be. It was hard for Burg to be away from Sheba. He'd stand and stare through the window of the nursery. He knew they'd have to leave the hospital soon, and waves of anxiety washed over him. He'd look at the other babies and wonder if their folks were making it, if their lives were all neatly sorted out. He felt like a pretender. When it was time to be discharged, Burg, Colette, and Jewel gathered their things. In a carrier supplied by the hospital and attached to the bill, they transported their new precious cargo to their apartment. Jewel stayed a few days, sleeping on the couch, and helped them get settled. Although Burg and Cole's pride, to their detriment, still prevented them from trusting her completely with the details of their struggle, Jewel was family. They'd already been through so much together. She had a calming effect on them and brought hope to every situation when she was present. They looked forward to Juju being the official doting grandma, and so did Jewel. Even though she'd been on a pretty tight budget for years now, she wouldn't allow them to pay for anything when she was around. Taking the list to the market and stocking up on diapers and food was the first thing she did when they got back from the hospital. She'd noticed the sparsity in their tiny abode, but just chalked it up to a young couple living on love. Through Jewel's lens, Burg and Colette were walking down the obligatory romantic path of an early family starting out, engaging in the hopeful struggle, not teetering on the edge of disaster. Either way, she'd be there for them. Burg and Colette knew this, and they were greatly comforted. By Friday morning, Jewel's work for the time being was done. She'd have stayed longer, but the nest was settled, and she knew that they needed time now to establish the Hawkins tribe. Burg called a cab, walked her out, they hugged goodbye, and off she went, excited about the ways she was going to spoil her new grandbaby and the show tunes that she would teach her. When he got back up to the apartment, he kissed Colette on the forehead, sat down, looked at his wife and baby, smiled, and said, "Wow, look at us. We're a family." "Yes, we are, Burg Hawkins. We are 3 now. I love you, baby. I love you too." Sheba settled right in. In waking moments, she was alert but seemed unusually content and calm for a newborn. It would be apparent later that Sheba had come out of the womb with her sense of identity fully formed, a gift that would bring both reward and suffering. The 3 of them, grateful to be home and not realizing how exhausted they were, fell fast asleep to the low volume of an old black and white movie on their small TV. Coming up in Chapter 5 of My Name Is Sheba. Burg awoke, startled by the siren of the police car racing by their complex. Not that it was unusual, but it was only mid-afternoon. He'd just been shaken from the kind of hard sleep that leaves one disoriented when they come to. He looked around. Cole and Sheba were still out. He looked at the digital clock on the nightstand, 2:57. Then he heard multiple sirens, a ways off, but the commotion told him something was up. Burg noticed the TV, still on, now flickering through the 3rd old movie since morning. "Let's check out the news," he thought. Keeping the TV on at low volume, he surfed through the local New York channels. CBS, The Guiding Light. NBC, Santa Barbara. ABC, General Hospital. Just as Burg was about to move on, the local news broke in with a special report. "We interrupt our regularly scheduled program to bring you This chapter of My Name Is Sheba was written, recorded, and produced by me, Monroe Jones. The series is based on music from the album My Name Is Sheba by Kandace Springs and can be found at Spotify, Apple, or wherever you stream music. Other original music in this episode is by Jason Donnelly, Enzo Orifice, Zur, and Tincture Music, all of whom have royalty-free music available at Storyblocks. That's storyblocks.com. For more behind-the-scenes info on the creators of the story and the music, visit mynamessheba.com. Finally, if you like what you're hearing, please follow, leave a rating, and tell a friend. My Name is Sheba is a product of Subplay Creative.